29.
28 seconds.
27.
26.
25 seconds.
24. 23.
22 seconds.
21 seconds.
20 seconds.
19.
18.
17 seconds.
16.
15 seconds.
14.
13 seconds.
12.
11.
10 seconds. 9.
8.
7.
6.
6 what?
Copy.
5 seconds.
3, 2, 1.
Hi folks, and welcome back to the Scotch Trekker. Today we'll be discussing Star Trek The Next Generation. Thank you very much to my friend Earl Grey Tracky for coming on. What are some of your favourite episodes of The Next Generation?
My favourite episodes, probably yesterday's Enterprise. That's a bit of a typical story.
Cool.
I really like Darmok because it's a simpler story. You only have mainly two characters down on this planet who can't communicate. And it's really interesting to see Picard struggle, because we do see him struggle, but he's so stoic that he really represses it. And I think the character of Darmok is just really interesting in a way of visualizing how people sometimes struggle to communicate. We hadn't really had a lot of alien beings struggling to communicate with the Enterprise or any of the TNG crew in a big capacity until then. And it's just lovely to see Picard and Darmok grow even though they can't fully communicate. It's just a really nice message that you don't have to fully understand someone or speak the same language as someone to appreciate them and get to know them in a way. Tapestry, I would rewatch that recently. Amazing acting from both Patrick Stewart and John Delancey. I think Q is really hilarious in that episode. He has a lot of nice jokes, but it's also, that story has also got a deeper message of being yourself, of mortality, and it's a very Shakespearean episode. Rewatching TNG, I've been wondering, do you think that Patrick Stewart asked for TNG to be a bit Shakespearean? Because he does get quite a few Shakespearean lines.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised by that. I was thinking, like, yesterday's Enterprise was on the list that I wrote of some of my favourite episodes. I also included, like, The Defector, which is the first one I ever saw, and I thought it was, like, really dramatic, and the series finale, All Good Things, which I thought was really cool to see, like, the future that might be, sort of thing, as well as, like, them recreating the past, sort of thing, right back at the start of the series. It was quite cool.
I think...
Starfleet Boys joined us in the way, saying hello in the chat.
Hi, Sohail.
Hi, Starfleet.
I think that the TNG finale, All Good Things, is kind of perfect in a way, because it's almost a typical episode of TNG. You've got Q in there, you've got time travel, but it's crafted so perfectly and so cinematically. And when you're watching it, it really doesn't drag at all. And it maintains interest, because you're going into these different realities, future and past, and you're also, as the audience, wondering what is wrong with Picard. Why does he have this syndrome? And you're worried about the main character. It is perfect, as Starfleet Boy said in the comments. And it's also really beautiful at the end when Picard finally doesn't really admit that he has been closed off, but he actually plays poker with the crew for once. And that wonderful line from Troy, "You were always welcome." It's
Yeah. Because I think
feel
before that he says like I wish I'd joined you for more games or whatever.
yeah,
He said something like that. Well, I was thinking as well. I think it's a great sort of like bookend to the series where Q continues basically its trial of humanity that's begun at the very start of the series and then counted at Farpoint, and it just shows with like the trailers coming out for Star Trek Picard, and that line, the trial never ends, that's quoted. Just shows like the significance of the Next Generation to the Star Trek franchise, I guess, and the success of it.
yeah, it just shows how versatile John Delancey can be in his acting. Because Q isn't your stereotypical villain. He's very Shakespearean, but he's not evil. If you think about it, what we learn about Q, he's an outcast from probably a very mature species. He's kind of like this curious child who plays with the Enterprise crew like they're toys. This omnipotent being, and obviously he enjoys tormenting Picard and annoying Picard, but the chemistry between Patrick Stewart and John Delancey is really a magnificent thing to watch. Maybe not as much in the earlier seasons for me, but I think come season 3, season 4, they really hit their stride, and it's really just like watching a play with both of them.
I'm going to bring Bob Foster, who's joined us as another co-host. Hi, Bob. Thanks for
How you
joining
doing,
the chat.
guys? See, we're talking some Q.
Some TNG. Your dog's noisy today.
When are they not? I'm sorry. I gave him some treats, but I thought that was enough.
All right.
They're blackmailing me for more. So, I see we're talking about Q.
Yeah, well, the first question I've asked is, what are some of your favorite episodes of The Next Generation?
Oh, man, there's so many.
Yeah.
I think Best of Both Worlds, the two-parter, was the most riveting. It was probably the most exciting, season ender, season beginner that I can think of. Just because it had everything. It had tension. It had some really dramatic acting, and it was a big crisis that we had never seen the likes of up to that point in Next Gen.
And Grant in the chat is nominated the Drumhead as a favorite installment. Yeah. So, what are some of your what's your favorite character from the series, if you have one? Great, Tracky.
For me, it's definitely Data. Sorry, I just need to plug in my Mac or it'll turn off, and I'll tell you why it's Data. Sorry.
Do you want to answer that, Limbo?
Gosh, it's a hard one, but I think, a tie of Picard and Riker, because I think they work so well together. And we got to see a different type of captain with Next Gen. And it was a series that proved that, you didn't need the original characters from the first series. But Picard's style of leadership was so different than Kirk, and I think that was important to see a whole different arrangement of personalities on the bridge, and do just as well, if not better, than aspects of the original, but with a with different personalities, different dynamic, and Riker was filled in where Picard had weaknesses, and Picard was, more the father figure. So I think it was a great ensemble, but I think those two were, are my favorites.
So I wrote down Data, but Worf, I think, also ranks high, in my opinion. Yeah, Robin.
Definitely.
My favorite character is Data because I think Brent Spiner is a very versatile actor. I'm surprised he isn't a bigger actor, to be honest, because Data as a character could have been very boring, very one note, an android. How are you supposed to play an android? But Brent Spiner brought humor and an inherent curiosity on the Enterprise that I think a lot of people can relate to. A lot of maybe lonely people who struggle to make friends, a lot of autistic people. He's like the Spock, basically. And
Like an outsider.
yeah, like an outsider. And as Odo, well, we're talking about TNG, but I really like the quote from Odo. Outsiders usually have the most unique perspective. And I think that's what Data brought through his wee logs of the Enterprise crew, especially in Data's day, where you really get an insight into how he functions, what he thinks of other people. And I'm very glad that Brent Spiner wasn't restricted to no smiling or being very stoic in his facial expressions, because it just makes him seem more advanced when he's pretending to smile or he isn't really feeling the expression he's giving. Yeah.
Yeah, we watched his
thinking-
evolution too over the episodes, seasons.
I was thinking about another character who we see the evolution of in a way, and also connects to Deep Space Nine. I was thinking about Miles O'Brien. I was thinking, I really like that character, and I wonder if you have any favorite minor characters that are apart from the main cast.
Rowan Barkley for me.
Rowan Barkley.
Because Barkley was again one of these people that you could so identify with. He was the clumsy, socially challenged person, but you watched him gradually grow, and you could see that he was very talented, but he had a confidence issue, and plus he was brilliantly played by Dwight Schultz. Who like Brent Spiner is a great actor, probably a little underrated, but he's just a wonderful actor and excels at those kind of offbeat kind of people that he plays. And Ensign Ro, was another character who we didn't know what we were going to get out of Ensign Ro, because she kind of came in as definitely an outcast, and and she grew on us, and her departure was a bit shocking, but probably true to her path. So, Michelle Forbes, again, another wonderful actress, just did an outstanding job, and we cared about, I think, Next Gen more than maybe any of the, well, perhaps not, maybe DS9 would have this, but we saw so many minor roles of characters that we really would have loved to have seen more of. Shelby, Robin Leffler, Okana, people that we would have loved. And I know we've previously done an installment where we've explored characters we'd love to have seen come back more often, or, those that were one shots, but definitely for me, those two stand out.
Although Ensign Ro wasn't in the show for long, when you think of it, she did have quite an important. She was an important character because she brought the Maquis. Is that how you say it? The
Maquis.
The Maquis.
Yeah, Maquis.
The Maquis into Star Trek and Deep Space Nine more prominently. Voyager not so much, but she was potentially going to be on Deep Space Nine instead of Kira. So although she wasn't, she holds a very important part of Star Trek history. If you go back into the roots of the Maquis, I think my favorite one-off character, and this is maybe a bit of a sillier choice, probably Lwaxana Troi. She can be annoying and degrading, but I think Majel Barrett really played her very well, and it's obviously nice to see Gene Roddenberry's wife get a big role because she was really restricted. I mean, she couldn't stay as number one, and then they had to change her wig and make her look like a different character, be Nurse Chapel, and then obviously she's immortalized as the voice of a computer. But not only that, I think she adds a lot to Deanna Troi, who I wish we had gotten more of, to learn more of, and just, it's wonderful that she's the counselor, but I feel even with all of her sessions talking to people, we don't really learn that much about her, apart from that she doesn't like her mother. And I think that's something that is really a downfall of TNG, the fact that we don't get more of an insight into Beverly and Deanna Troi. I know that TNG isn't heavily character driven. I suppose you could say we don't learn loads about Picard or anyone really, but I just felt they were quite underutilized. And when Deanna Troi is talking about something, it's usually gossip with Beverly. Not really anything nuanced, which is a shame because TNG is very nuanced.
I think one of the most powerful episodes was just after Best of Both Worlds, when when Picard goes to Earth and he has to recover, and his brother, is minding the vineyards, and wonderful, brilliant actor who I believe died last year, was almost a little bully to him. You could tell that he resented that he was left with the vineyard and he didn't get to do the things that Picard got to do, or even if it wasn't going to be his path, he didn't get to maybe do what he wanted to do, or he had some resentment there. But in the end, you could that very powerful scene where Picard breaks down and realizes that the things he did as Locutus, and his brother just grabs him and just says, well, my brother isn't this legend, or after all, but he does it in such a way that is just so moving. I think that was one of the best episodes. So you had really 3 classic episodes right in a row, but so different from each other. And when we saw Generations and learned of the brother's death, even though they were in the pictures they were played by different people, but both the nephew and the brother, but made it, I believe really struck fans, even more, because even though we only got to see them in one episode, they left a powerful, presence behind, and definitely contributed to Picard's character,
So what do you think are the best character relationships in The Next Generation was my next question, but I suppose I'll limit it to what do you think are the best relationships between the main characters of The Next Generation?
For me, I quite like Picard and Beverly. I don't think we get enough of them because we get little hints here and there, and of course we get the backstory that Picard took home Wesley's father. But I wish we'd seen their relationship develop even into a marriage. Maybe it seems like a bit much, but if you look at Deep Space Nine, that's my favorite series, so I'm a bit biased, but they really did a good job of hooking characters up and going the next step of where you'd think their journeys would progress. And I think Gates McFadden is just a wonderful actress. She plays her scenes very naturally. She doesn't feel like she's acting quite a lot, maybe a bit more in the medical scenes, but with her more touching scenes with Picard, it does feel very natural, and they do have a genuine even in The Naked Now, which I think is a horrible episode just because it's basically redoing TOS to a T. They weren't very original, and I suppose they weren't very interesting to me until season 3, when obviously they got rid of a lot of the season 1 and 2 writers and got Ronald D. Moore on the show, and obviously Gene Roddenberry. He was in very poor health by then, so I'm not saying that the show got better when he wasn't as hands-on, but I think just the combination of Gene Roddenberry not being able to be as restrictive, because obviously he didn't allow any conflict, which I think is quite important. You need conflict to make interesting stories. I just love Beverly Crusher. I think she plays the mother role quite well.
It was the first time we saw, a character who was a parent, and had that child on the ship, not just a parent, but was right there. And, to think that we almost lost, Dr. Crusher, she was Gates McFadden was let go, for the second season. And, Diana Muldaur, who is a wonderful actress, but the character, I don't think, gelled right. And I know there was a change in writers and everything. And it was just wonderful that they realized their mistake and brought back Gates McFadden, because Beverly provides she has such a wonderful dynamic with Patrick Stewart as Picard. Their morning breakfast routine. You knew they were getting very comfortable with each other. And then you have the Beverly Deanna friendship, as the two lead females. We might have seen that, along with Tasha Yar as well, if Tasha hadn't, had been killed off and left the show.
It's interesting.
Yeah. I don't think the Deanna Worf, I think their friendship worked, but I think when they tried to bring it into a romance, I don't necessarily think that worked. And I think fans really wanted to see the Riker Deanna, relationship take the next step. Because remember, the two of them were patterned after the Star Trek motion pictures, Stephen Decker and Elia. They were pretty much patched in as the new version for next gen, from phase 1.
Phase 2.
Yeah, phase 2. I'm sorry. I think it kind of had a course correction there, but and also the friendship between Geordi and Data, that they were close. Yeah. I mean, there was a closeness there, and not just because Data needed, a friend who could also know the technical issues, although Data spent as much time in sickbay as he would in engineering for problems. So
So is there like a particular season of The Next Generation that you think is the best?
Personally, I'm a big fan of season 4. I've been rewatching the show with my mum, and she's watching it for the first time, and she was quite disappointed in the first 2 seasons. I'd agree with her. I think they have nice moments, but they're very black and white. They stick to the TOS mold too much. I understand that they were trying to gain TOS fans who were the majority back then. But I think there was a lack of nuance in the first 2 seasons that you really don't get until later. Season 3, it begins, and obviously you get almost I think of the best of both worlds as almost like it's almost a TNG film in a way.
Yeah.
And then you have family, as you were talking about, which is just the perfect capper on the action-paced, well, not really action, but that story. I just think season 4 is full of good episodes. Season 3 is a big step up, but I think season 4 is even better.
Yeah, I would agree. Season 4, really set the scene for how the series would go on, and really showed itself. First season was more or less an experiment. Second season was sort of trying to fix what they didn't yet know what they had. And then when season 3 kind of finally set things truly up, and then they improved by 4, and then would just continue.
I think I've got 2 favorite seasons. I've been trying to decide between them, and I find it really difficult. And that's seasons 3 and 6. I think my least favorite season is season 7, because so much of it is about family, like the family of the main cast, and it's like watching it. It's like the same sort of theme came coming up in like all these different episodes. But yeah, I enjoy 3 and 6.
I think by the time you get to season 7, after you've had so many good seasons of quality TV, you can kind of sense that the writers, they've kind of maybe not ran out of ideas, but they're retreading similar storylines. Maybe that was because they were writing Generations. I think that was a bit later on in season 7.
Well, 7, they knew that this would be the last season, and I think that is why you had so many episodes that were focused on wrapping up the story lines of certain characters, like like Wesley and Ensign Rowe, which were almost back to back. So it was you kind of felt bad for Picard because Wesley was like, finally, hey, I'm moving on, and I've got other path, and I'm not going to go the course that everybody expects me to. And then you have Ensign Rowe, who decides to, after all of Picard's, best wishes and training and everything, decides to go with the Maquis. So, as much as she was beloved, it was not an easy time for Picard. So, I think that season was almost had a kind of a underlying theme of wrapping up things. I also think we saw one of the last, I forgot what the episode was with Laxwana at that point, but I think we saw a 7th season episode with her.
Oh, Dark Page.
Is
where
that
it turns out? Yeah, Dark Page, where it turns out like Deanna had a young sister that died, passed away.
That's right.
Baby.
Yeah.
Speaking of like younger people, do you think The Next Generation is still relevant to the younger generations?
That's a good question, Dan. It was funny at that time. Speaking as a fan, at that time, especially heading a fan club, so many young people coming into the fold, and their first introduction to Star Trek was in fact Next Gen because it was popular. That's the uniforms that people were wearing at conventions, more so than the Monster Maroons, which were more expensive. Sorry. And you were seeing that whole new generation coming into fandom, and and now that particular generation that had come up to join clubs and were involved at that time are they're now older than some of us were at that time, and now the torch has kind of been passed to to people watching Discovery and Lower Decks and things like that. So I really wonder if are the stories still relevant? Absolutely. So was original Trek, but I think now a lot of our fans, our younger fans, came into it through either the more recent movie franchise of the JJ verse, or through Discovery. So it's amazing to watch. Here we are, the 55th year of Star Trek, and we have fans that came into it from different points. Voyager, Deep Space Nine, Enterprise, but most recently Discovery. So because we had that gap in between. So I think it's multi-generational.
I can't speak for everyone, but I was brought into Star Trek fandom from TNG, and I've always been a big sci-fi lover. I love Doctor Who quite a lot, but Star Trek has really surpassed my love for Doctor Who, just because it's so vast. There are so many TV shows with different genres, different wonderful characters. But I was basically just scrolling Netflix and I saw TNG. Wasn't fully on board for the first 2 seasons, but season 3 got me right there. And I just related to a show like I hadn't any other. It just has such deep writing, characters that you want to be like, they inspire you. And if you're really taking the message of the show, then you'll become more like them, and a better person, really. There are just so many themes you can talk about from that show, and I'm so glad that I randomly saw TNG on Netflix and decided to give it a go, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't have watched Deep Space Nine, I wouldn't have watched Voyager, Enterprise, Lower Decks, Discovery, TOS, any of it. And it's wonderful to be a part of the Star Trek family, because talking to people like you, it's wonderful to talk about people that love the same thing as you, because then you're really enjoying your conversation. And not only that, but you're talking about important issues as well as entertainment. It's that mix of education and entertainment, which is so wonderful in Star Trek.
Yeah, I thought
you bring up a good point. Doctor Who is also multi-generational, and I come from the era of the, Tom Baker was my first Doctor and still my favorite, but I really I love the new Doctor Who, of course, and they have a budget that the early Doctor Who could only dream of, and doing stories that couldn't be done, either technically or, the story writing, a period of that time wouldn't permit it. Not to mention the time frame, of the limitations of time they had. So, in many ways, we see the production evolve over time to where we are now watching Star Trek on a streaming service, as opposed to we had network, we had Next Gen was the first to go and be a syndicated Star Trek on through syndication, direct syndication. And then Deep Space Nine was the same. And then Voyager was the first to be on a brand new network, followed by Enterprise, which was also on a network. Of course, we had the feature films, but still, and now we've reached the age of streaming, which is definitely unique and allows for, things like short treks, shorter, it's put it into a medium where it doesn't have to be 60 minutes long. It could be shorter.
But also,
longer.
Like the home video format also has changed during all of that time. Upgrading from VHS to Laserdisc to
Blu-ray.
DVD to Blu-ray now. Yeah.
Now we got something 5K or something.
Yeah.
Keep up.
Yeah. But I wrote down. I don't think TNG's lost like any of its appeal. When I wrote that, noted that to myself, I was thinking like absolutely like about the stories and stuff like that. I was thinking like if there's anything that's potentially like sort of dated the Next Generation, I think it might be the effects. But then I had, of course, the thought to myself during the show actually that even then, you've got the remastered version of the episodes. That significantly like improved the effects, I think, while keeping true to the spirit of the show and the way that the effects were intended. So yeah, I just think it's great. If there's probably anything that's sort of indicative of or characteristic of the 1980s, I know a lot of people talk about like Deanna Troi, like the inclusion of a counselor on board the ship. But then even then, like I've never thought that to myself, because if you have people on a long-term mission, yes, they will need a counselor or someone to help the mental health of the crew during that period, especially when you've got like quite a few cases shown in previous set Star Trek shows, like in the Battle of the Binary Stars Discovery episode, where there's a guy that's like, we shouldn't be out here, and similarly in the original series, when they go, well, they call them Space Mad or something like that. So yeah, like I don't think that necessarily dates the show in a way.
Plus, the crew complement has increased. The original Enterprise had 400 and something odd, Starfleet personnel, whereas Next Gen, the 1701-D had, I think, closer to 1,000, and within that 1,000 were civilians. So, what we never got to see is, I'm sure Counselor Troi had more of a staff. I'm sure she couldn't be the only counselor, but she was head of the department.
Well, you see other counselors, I'm sure. She's just the head of that.
But it was a great addition to, a new position. I wish we had seen an actual science officer. I thought that was the one thing on Next Gen that was lacking. That
I thought Data was technically
kind of did that, but I don't think he was officially the science chief because he wasn't in blue, or he would be in a blue uniform. But I mean, I guess they didn't really need one because of Data's abilities. But I would have thought technically they should have had one.
I think they only changed the command color from mustard to red because Patrick Stewart didn't look great in mustard.
Right. Yeah, they tried. The test was just, otherwise we would have had our original classic colors still the same.
I think like so much of the behind the scenes work that went into the Next Generation is like really fascinating. Where like Picard like tried, or Patrick Stewart, I should say, tried like acting as Picard initially with a toupee and stuff like
Yeah.
that. It's just, yeah, the making of the show I thought was really interesting. Like they intended to have a musical episode, I think maybe several times, or it might just be like several series, including TNG. That they intended to write out Commander William T. Riker, and the fact that he is even called William T. With the same initial as James T. Kirk. And when they tried to write out, or not tried, but intended initially to write out his character in the episode's Second Chances and replace him with Thomas Riker, you know, I find it quite fascinating, the making of the show.
It's quite ironic that Patrick Stewart thought, well, he had to pretend that he had some kind of knowledge of Star Trek, and so he'd kind of say that he'd watched the original even though he hadn't really, and he only got on Star Trek because his agent said, this will be a quick job, no one's going to watch it, they can't recreate the original. And if it had kept on with the direction of the first 2 seasons, that would probably be true, but he didn't, I'm pretty sure he didn't unpack his suitcase for a good month or so, and it's funny to think how he talks about Star Trek now and the fact that he's still playing Picard so many years later.
And is one of the producers of Star Trek Picard. You know, granted, I think there's about 12 of them, but you know.
And Bob, like thinking about like your dog barking in the background, I was thinking like in the Next Generation, we've also got like the introduction of pets of the main characters with like Spot, who famously like changes gender during the course of the series, and Livingston in Picard's strategy room. So yeah, I thought it was interesting for those aspects as well.
Yeah.
Becoming more sort of a home from home for the, you know, the crew members, where they're allowed like creature comforts.
Yeah, because they didn't have this 5-year limitation, I think, because they could be there much longer. There were more, you know, they kind of brought their families with them. So, I mean, it seemed like space exploration was becoming more, I don't want to say less exciting, but was becoming more comfortable, was becoming, you know, I guess maybe their particular missions, you know, I mean, not to say there still wasn't danger, but I think, you know, the socialization factor came in, and that families wanted to share that time, and they didn't want, you know, and members of Starfleet didn't want to be having these long stretches where they were away from their families.
I think that was based.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, what?
I was going to say the original in the original track. You know, we could probably surmise that most of the Starfleet officers, with a few exceptions, you know, or crew personnel, were probably single people. You know, it was a big deal when in Balance of Terror, when that officer and you know, in engineering and Angela, whatever her name was, we're going to get married. You know, like it wasn't, I guess it was allowed, but it probably wasn't common that you would get to, you know, that you would have a marriage on board, which made it kind of special. But on the other hand, you know, they're working together, and you're not, you know, your choices are limited because the crew is your whole social environment in those cases. So, you know, whereas, you know,
yeah. Whereas what?
Whereas with Enterprise, by that time, we, you know, 79 years later, you know, we see a whole different kind of more of a family dynamic of bringing your family with you on the mission, or related, you know, careers on a starship. You know, a school teacher could, you know, just as easily teach on board a starship and not be part of Starfleet yet, because there's a need to have them, because now there's children on board the ship. So
Yeah.
it was an
But I
interesting
think, like,
decision.
it was an interesting. Sorry, what?
I thought that was a very interesting decision by Gene Roddenberry.
Alright. Well, I was just thinking, I think like a lot of that sort of family aspect was brought in, influenced by David Gerald, especially like his book, The World of Star Trek, that like seemed to influence both the advent of that decision and the arrangement where there's a first officer that would be more likely to go on the away missions and a captain on board the Enterprise.
Yeah, because originally
in contrast
Picard
to the
was
original
going to
series.
be more in the background. He was going to be, Riker was going to head those away team missions. And then they realized that even though Picard wasn't quite, the heroic and physical figure of Kirk, that him being the captain and his having the charisma and leadership that he had, that, why not? So, so Picard took, more, got more attention.
Yep. Thank you very much to our viewers for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe to the video if you've enjoyed it. And join us tomorrow at 10 AM Pacific, 1 AM Eastern, 6 PM UK, when we'll be speaking with actor Jeremy Roberts, who famously played Valtane in The Undiscovered Country in the Voyager episode. As Captain Picard might say, engage. Thanks very much to our Grey Trekkie and to Bob for joining the discussion today.
Great to be here.